Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today is, well, it's pretty ambitious. We are going to try and find the universal blueprints for character.
The ones that have actually worked.
Exactly. The ones that have successfully survived for millennia, transcending geography, religion, all the political upheaval you can imagine. We're really trying to answer the question, how do you build a person? Not of flesh and bone, but of, enduring integrity and ethical structure.
And we're going to do that by taking a very serious deep dive into some pretty profound source material. We're leaning heavily on Joseph Fort Newton's monumental study, The Builders.
Which is an incredible piece of work.
It is. It traces how the practical hands-on knowledge of ancient architects and stoneworkers, how that became formalized into this profound global system of moral conduct, a system built entirely around symbols.
And this is a massive body of lore we're talking about. It spans from the tombs of ancient Egypt all the way to the foundations of the Enlightenment. So our goal here is to give you the distillation, the essential applicable wisdom. Think of it as a shortcut to understanding how a simple set of architectural tools became these timeless emblems for integrity, for brotherhood, and for spiritual purpose. We're calling this deep dive the cab call. It's about plotting the moral coordinates for a life that is, truly well lived.
That analogy, plotting a course, is just perfect. Because if you think about ancient man, he was navigating a world of complete chaos, total uncertainty. And the first philosophers, the first builders, they realized that a successful life, much like a successful journey, it requires stable foundations. It needs an unshakable direction and a clear, meaningful destination.
The coordinates.
The moral coordinates. And these builders, they provided those precise coordinates using the language of their trade.
Which I think brings up the initial paradox for a lot of people. If we're looking for universal moral conduct, why are we talking about guilds and hammers and cutting stone?
Right. Why architecture?
Yeah, why is the history of architecture even relevant to ethics today?
Because for the ancient person, there was just no separation between the practical and the spiritual. It was all one thing.
Okay.
Our sources establish this as the central thesis. Work was never just about the physical output. Every single practical law of construction was seen as an exponent of a moral law.
An exponent, so it's like a physical manifestation of a spiritual truth.
Exactly. If your level was off, the wall would fail. If your justice was off, the community would fail. The physical consequence was a direct mirror of the ethical consequence.
So a failed building wasn't just a mistake in engineering, it was a moral statement.
It was a moral failure.
Wow. So this history then, it isn't just about the craft of masonry. It's about the very matrix of civilization, as the sources put it. It's about the disciplined, self-governing process these individuals use to build character, to build community structure.
Which is something, arguably more urgent today than it has ever been.
Absolutely. So let's start at the foundation with this idea of architecture as a kind of moral law, the ancient blueprint.
If we look at the very origins of settled human society, the sources are crystal clear on this. There were two arts that fundamentally altered the face of the earth.
Two arts.
Agriculture and architecture. They gave man time to think, time to reflect. Man is a planter, yes, but crucially, he is a builder and he is a mystic. He's compelled to structure his world, not just physically, but intellectually as well.
And that impulse to build, it almost immediately went beyond just simple survival needs.
Oh, instantly.
Man needed shelter, of course, but that demand for a roof was very quickly coupled with a demand for a home for the soul.
A home for the soul. I love that phrasing.
It became spiritual long before it was just utilitarian.
And we see this most clearly in the foundational culture of, Egypt. Their architecture, dominated by the pyramids and massive temples. It wasn't built for decades or even for centuries.
Right. It was for keeps.
It was built for eternity.
Yeah.
They needed an absolutely indestructible resting place for the soul. And this blending of the utilitarian, the need for a tomb, with the religious or magical purpose is absolutely key.
What was the goal then?
The structure was meant to achieve magical stability. It was designed to be, as they believed, firm as the heavens.
The moment you start asking a piece of stone to embody permanence, you're not talking about physics anymore. You're looking for moral laws.
You are.
And this brings us right to John Ruskin, who argued this so fiercely, that the laws governing noble architecture are fundamentally moral laws, and that they're directly applicable to building a noble character.
Ruskin's framework, which he called the 7 Lamps of Architecture, it provides this magnificent, incredibly practical checklist for integrity. It doesn't matter if you're laying stone or conducting a business deal.
Okay, let's spend some real time on these because they're not just abstract concepts, they're about accountability. What's the first one?
The first is sacrifice.
Sacrifice.
This is the commitment to use the absolute best materials, the finest workmanship, even the parts of the building that will never ever be seen by a human eye.
Like the deepest foundation stones?
The very deepest. And so when you apply that to character, it means giving the highest quality of yourself when absolutely no one is watching. It's ensuring your internal motivations are sound, not just your outward actions.
That's powerful. What's next?
Truth. No false materials. No veneers pretending to be solid stone. The structure must be exactly what it appears to be.
So for character, that's just absolute honesty, rejecting all forms of hypocrisy, all pretense.
Exactly. Then you have power. And this doesn't mean brute size. It refers to the spiritual force that permeates the design. It's a vitality, a sense of noble aspiration that makes the viewer feel uplifted.
It reminds you of your own potential.
It does. Then comes beauty, which Ruskin says we imitate from natural forms, whether we know it or not. It must always reveal the quality of the mind behind the work. If the work is ugly, he argues, it reflects an ignoble or a careless mind.
That's a high standard.
It is. Then life, which demands that architecture be vibrant and original, not just a mechanical repetition of old forms. It has to reflect the energy of its time, the creativity of the individual, and memory is the duty to make sure the building honors history, honors those who came before.
Recognizing we're always building on foundations laid by others.
Always. And finally, the crowning grace, which Ruskin calls obedience.
Obedience. That one sounds a little tricky in the modern world.
It is, but he didn't mean subjugation. He meant loyalty. Loyalty to the established higher laws of life and truth, whether they're moral laws or geometric laws. He argued that there's no such thing as true human liberty until you've first chosen to be loyal to these fixed eternal laws.
That's a profound thought. So if you violate any of these...
The consequence is immediate. If you cut corners on sacrifice or use false materials in defiance of truth, the architectural consequence is right there for everyone to see. The usefulness is marred, the beauty is spoiled.
And the whole structure is at risk. It becomes unstable.
It's the ultimate feedback loop. You can't fake it with stone.
So where did this concept, this idea of fixed, dependable law even begin? We have to go back to Egypt.
Back to Egypt. Herodotus noted that they achieved the gathering of resources with less labor than any other people. And what that really meant was they had the mental space to think, to develop geometry.
And that reflection led to a revolution.
A geometric revolution. The earliest known structure we found, a prehistoric tomb at a place called Hierakonpolis, was already based on the right angle. The discovery of the square, which allowed for stable, proportional, predictable construction. It was a giant leap in both geometry and art.
You have to imagine that moment for the primitive builder, right? Constantly struggling with irregular stones and chaotic measurements.
Yes.
The square must have felt like a divine principle, not just a tool, but something that imposes order on absolute chaos.
And that's precisely how they understood it. From the very earliest period, the square was adopted as an emblem of truth, of justice, and of righteousness.
It guaranteed that your work, and by extension your dealings with other people, would be on the square.
Balanced, fair, reliable. This simple tool became a fundamental moral teacher that has persisted for thousands of years.
And the temples they built using this principle, they were meant to be images of the cosmos.
Yes, the scholar Maspero observed this. Egyptian builders constructed temples in the image of the earth as they imagined it. The pavement was the earth itself.
Okay.
The four angles of the building were the pillars holding up the entire universe. And the ceiling, which was painted dark blue with 5 pointed stars, that was the sky.
So the goal was to achieve that magical stability you mentioned earlier.
To align man's temporary physical structure with the enduring order of the cosmos. To be firm as the heavens. The architecture was a direct manifestation of their philosophy, of their understanding of their place in the universe.
And of course, we see this pursuit of eternity most vividly in the pyramids. They stand as the oldest, largest, and most technically perfect monuments. They were essentially built to defy time itself.
And the obelisk is the perfect summary of this synthesis of form and faith. It's essentially a pyramid whose base was drawn out into a long shaft holding aloft the oldest solar emblems.
Which were?
A triangle mounted squarely upon a cube. The pyramid, the triangle, represented heaven, the celestial laws, while the cube, the square, represented earth, the material world that is governed by those laws.
So it's a physical demonstration.
A concrete demonstration that the laws of architecture are inseparable from the laws of the eternal.
This realization that fundamental laws are fixed and universal, it brings us to this fascinating phenomenon of shared symbols across completely separate cultures.
Yes, and this confirms one of Socrates' most profound discoveries, one of the greatest philosophical insights of antiquity, really.
Which was?
Socrates realized that when men, it doesn't matter their culture, their language, their location, when they think deeply and correctly about a problem, they inevitably disclose a common nature. They arrive at a common system of truth.
So it confirmed the kinship of mankind and the unity of mind.
The unity of mind. That is the philosophical bedrock of why the tools of the builder became universal moral emblems. It explains why people who were widely separated use the exact same signs and symbols without ever having learned them from one another.
They weren't borrowed.
They were discovered organically.
Yeah.
It confirms that we are, deep down, unified in our search for meaning and for structure.
So let's look at some of these universal emblems. Let's start with the triangle, or the concept of the Trinity.
Right. And while it has all these complex theological interpretations now, its root idea grew from the most basic, natural human experience you can imagine.
Father, mother, child.
Father, mother, child. The essential unit of creation and lineage. And that structure of three, representing creation, manifestation, and duration, you find it absolutely everywhere. In India, you have Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma. In Egypt, Osiris, Isis, Horus. It's in almost every ancient mythological structure.
It's just a testament to how humans naturally perceive the generative process.
In sets of three, yes.
Then there's the swastika. And this is a symbol that obviously carries immense negative weight in modern history.
Immense.
But we have to look past that to its universal meaning. It is, arguably, the oldest and most widely distributed symbol on Earth.
It is. You find it on Chaldean bricks, in the ruins of Troy, among Native American burial grounds, in Mexico. It's everywhere.
And its original meaning?
It comes from the Sanskrit root, and it means it is well. It was an intimation of the beneficence of life, of cosmic order. It symbolized the path of light, running through the chaotic maze of life, offering hope and stability.
And it was also seen as an emblem of something specific in the sky, right?
The fixed pole star.
Yeah.
The absolute center, the only stable point in the ever-changing heavens. So man, searching for stability down on Earth, looked up to the heavens, and the pole star, represented by the swastika, became this light of assurance, the footstool of the Most High.
It's a similar story with the cross. It was a universal symbol of life, or eternal life, long before any specific theological adoption.
Long before. It's a figure that paradoxically points to the four quarters of the earth. It signifies connection and balance, especially when it's enclosed in the circle of eternity.
And the circle itself, often an image of the sun's disk, of completeness.
And when the builder adds a single centered point inside that circle, you get the natural emblem of the eye of the world, the eternal watcher, the all-seeing eye. These are not just features of fancy. They are forms of reality revealed to the human mind as it seeks to comprehend the universe.
And these philosophical ideas were then immediately translated into the actual materials the builder worked with.
Of course. Take the cube, the rough cube, or what they call the rough ashlar, and the polished cube, the perfect ashlar. These were venerated symbols. The oblong cube signified the immensity of space itself.
The rough ashlar is particularly relatable, I think. It's the stone as it comes from the quarry.
Chaotic.
Irregular, unfit for the structure. It's a perfect metaphor for the individual mind or for character before it's been disciplined and refined by philosophy.
Exactly. And so the entire goal of the craft is the production of the polished ashlar. The stone, and by extension the man, made square and true, fitted precisely to its place in the greater spiritual temple.
Plutarch, who was an initiate of the mysteries, he wrote about this.
He did. He noted that the cube is palpably the proper emblem of rest, of security, and of firmness. It is ever true to itself. That's why early altars were cubes, precisely because they represented unshakable geometrical truth.
And we find this moral application of tools incredibly early. It's not just a Western idea.
Not at all. In China, long before the Christian era, the Book of History instructed government officers to apply the compasses to their tasks.
To their tasks, not to stone.
To their tasks. And later, Mencius taught men to apply the square, the compasses, the level, and the marking line, not just to wood, but morally to their own lives, to walk the straight and even paths of wisdom.
So the idea of acting on the square is not a modern idiom. It's a philosophical mandate that existed in Chinese thought 700 years before Christ.
It confirms Socrates' unity of mind across entire continents.
And we even have concrete physical evidence that this symbolism was intrinsic to the builders themselves.
We do. When Cleopatra's Needle was moved to New York's Central Park in 1879, they uncovered the builder's emblems in the foundation, dating all the way back to antiquity.
What did they find?
The rough and polished cubes, the square, the trowel, and a stone bearing the master's mark. These were concrete witnesses that these builders lived and worked in the light of a mystical faith, where their tools were sacred emblems.
So despite all this, the structural perfection of their geometry, the moral guidance of their tools, there was still one unshakable, unconquerable fact for ancient man.
Death.
Death. No ritual, no law, no square could eliminate that certainty.
And this vacuum, the certainty of death but the hope for continuity, this is precisely why the mysteries were instituted. They were designed to keep that daring faith alive and aglow.
So they weren't just about secret knowledge.
No, they offered a dramatic, palpable portrayal of the unconquerable human aspiration for eternal life and for moral victory. They work through analogy.
What kind of analogy?
By observing the sun rising from the tomb of night every single morning, and by watching spring return triumphantly after the seeming death of winter, man reasoned that his own race would ultimately rise triumphant over the grave.
And the most influential of these dramas, and maybe the oldest continuous one, was the Osirian Passion Play in Egypt.
Yes, derived from the solar religion. It featured Osiris, the benign father, the fecund spirit and ruler of eternity, and his faithful sister wife, Isis. And the drama taught not only religion, but a rigorous ethical code and a sense of destiny beyond the tomb.
The central tragedy is deeply symbolic.
Deeply. Osiris is murdered and dismembered by his enemy, Typhon, who represents chaos and darkness. Isis then undertakes this heartbreaking quest, searching all across the world to gather the scattered pieces of her husband.
And she eventually finds the body hidden inside a shrub, which was then made into a revered column or pillar.
Right. And the power of this allegory is immense because it served a crucial double meaning. It connected the spiritual realm to the ethical realm right here on Earth.
So it wasn't just about life after death.
It taught not only immortality after physical death and the ultimate victory of good over evil, but also the awakening of man on Earth, the transformation from a chaotic animalistic state to a life governed by purity, justice, and honor.
The quest of Isis, gathering the fragments, that's a lesson in itself.
It's a lesson in fidelity and persistent spiritual work. It is the restoration of order and truth from chaos and betrayal. It is the ultimate building project.
And this profound moral drama was highly respected. The greatest minds of antiquity were initiated into these rites.
Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, Plutarch, they all were, and they all praised its ethical value. Plutarch, as a dedicated initiate, testified that the rites kept him as far from superstition as from atheism, and gave him happy hopes for the hour of his death.
So how were they organized?
Well, tradition credits Isis with establishing the first temple of the mysteries at Memphis, and they were separated into two distinct orders.
Okay.
The lesser mysteries were open to many. They involved dialogue, ritual, specific signs, tokens, and passwords. It was the basic instruction necessary for a moral life.
And the greater mysteries.
They were strictly reserved for the few who were deemed truly worthy of the highest secrets, and achieving that level required an intense process of trial, purification, hardship, and austere asceticism.
What was the culmination of that?
A dramatic, symbolic representation of death and spiritual regeneration. Only then did the candidate receive the highest wisdom, which often included geometry and astronomy, taught orally and through powerful symbols.
I mean, secrecy was paramount. This wasn't a game.
No, it was for survival and effectiveness. Awful oaths of secrecy were demanded. Plutarch describes the use of a knife at the throat, with death being the penalty for revealing the secrets. Think of Pythagoras, a foreigner who had to wait almost 20 years to be accepted and learn the hidden wisdom of Egypt.
That commitment to discipline over doctrine, maintained by that strict secrecy, that's what allowed the core teachings to survive.
And they did survive. These mysteries spread and evolved, passing to the Eleusinian rites in Greece, the Mithraic cults, the Adoniac and Kabiric mysteries. But the core motif, the death of a noble figure and the promise of resurrection or return to life, that was universal. Even the ancient Druids in England taught a version of this drama.
Okay, so we've established the key ingredients. Architecture is linked to religion, physical tools become moral emblems, and secret orders use this dramatic death and resurrection allegory to convey philosophy.
The three pillars.
Right. Now we have to tackle the hardest part of our cab call, the actual map, tracing this lineage from ancient Egypt all the way to medieval Europe. We need to prove the continuity.
Exactly. This requires connecting those ancient rituals to the operative builders who physically created the world's most magnificent structures. And our first major stop has to be the construction of Solomon's temple.
Because the Hebrews were not traditionally architects.
Correct. The sources are clear. The temple was designed and built by Phoenician masters from Tyre under the direction of Hiram Athirst.
And those Phoenician builders were highly organized.
Highly. They belonged to what are known as the Dionysian artificers. This was an order of builders active in Asia Minor and Phoenicia who combined the professional art of architecture with the secret knowledge of the mysteries, specifically those centered around Bacchus, who was often syncretized with the Egyptian Osiris.
So they were a secret society with their own signs and words.
They were. And they were active in that region for 50 years before the temple was even built. This provides the historical context for how the mysteries, with their focus on regeneration and the fate of the soul, could just seamlessly mingle with Hebrew faith during the temple's construction.
And this is the pivot point, where the historical narrative becomes the symbolic legend.
Yes. It gives context to the persistent tradition that the master artist of the temple, the man who oversaw the construction, became the tragic hero of this ancient drama of immortality. The fact that the tragedy is woven into the operational fabric of the greatest building project in their world, it reinforces the belief that the tools were always spiritual teachers.
So, following the Dionysiac artificers westward, the historical line takes us into the massive public works empire of Rome,
where we find the Roman Collegia. These were corporations of craftsmen that flourished across the entire Roman Empire. They moved with the legions and they built everything. Aqueducts, bridges, temples, entire cities.
And they were, in essence, Freemasons in law and fact, long before the term was even used in England.
That's the key, long before. Because they enjoyed special privileges and exemptions, they were absolved from taxes, they were free to travel across imperial borders, and they were protected legally. This freedom to travel and work outside the local feudal constraints was absolutely crucial for preserving and spreading their architectural and symbolic knowledge.
And their internal structure. It sounds remarkably familiar.
It is. The Collegia required no less than 3 persons to form a recognized body. A legal maxim actually rose from this: 3 make a college.
3 make a college.
And they operated under a magister, a master, and 2 decuriones, or wardens, who presided over their respective columns or congregations.
As the empire declined, many of these collegia, they transitioned into something else.
They became funerary and charitable societies, focusing on mutual aid and proper burial for their members. And critically, their tombs were marked with their trade emblems: the square, the compasses, the level, the plumb line. This proves that these tools held profound symbolic and spiritual weight for them. They served as a signature of a life lived by a moral law, even in death.
And we have physical confirmation of this, which is so essential for proving this continuity.
Yes, the discovery of a collegium buried at Pompeii, dated to 79 AD, confirmed the use of these tools as spiritual emblems, not just as physical instruments.
This Roman period also gives us the early patron saints of the builders.
The 4 crowned martyrs, a poignant story. These were Christian members of the Collegia who chose execution under the Emperor Diocletian rather than violate their conscience by creating a pagan statue of Aesculapius.
Their heroism, their willingness to die for the truth Ruskin's second lamp, became a foundational legend.
A legend illustrating integrity and fidelity within the entire building fraternity for centuries to come.
Now we get to the missing link, the part of the cab call map that guides us through the Dark Ages and bridges the classical period to the medieval cathedral building boom.
The Comacine Masters. The Magistri Comacini.
Who are they?
The historical theory is powerful. As the Western Roman Empire collapsed and chaos reigned, these elite architects preserved the classic Roman art traditions by retreating and consolidating their power base on an island in Lake Como in northern Italy. For centuries, they became the sole repository of advanced Roman building techniques in Western Europe.
And these weren't just ordinary workmen.
No, crucially, they were specialized artists. Architects, sculptors, painters, organized as magistri and discipulae under Gastaldo, a grand master, and they inherited that free, privileged status of the Roman Collegia.
So they were Freemasons in every essential way except the name.
Every essential way. They were a privileged class, free to travel and absolved from feudal servitude, hence Freemasons. They used specific structures called loggia for their meeting places. They had binding oaths and tokens, and they are credited with using early versions of white aprons and gloves. And they specifically revered the legend of the 4 crowned martyrs.
So this order provides the mechanism for that sudden, simultaneous change in architectural style across Europe.
The shift from the heavy Romanesque style to the soaring height and light of the Gothic. The great cathedrals were the collective work of this organized, highly disciplined traveling order, not the scattered work of local individuals, their enduring monuments or their history, written in stone.
And finally, to prove this continuity, we have to look at the written evidence, the old charges and manuscript legends.
Documents like the Regis MS and the Cook MS, dating from the 14th century onward, these are the title deeds of the order, blending factual history with mystical tradition and law.
And they insist fiercely on the antiquity of the craft.
Fiercely. They trace his origins to Egypt, blending figures like Euclid, who supposedly learned his science to restore Nile landmarks after the floods, Hermes, the father of wisdom, and Pythagoras. This mixture explicitly confirms that the builders themselves understood their lineage was philosophical and mystical, not just operative.
And the most telling clue of all is how they handle Solomon's temple.
Yes. The old charges discuss the building extensively, but they deliberately avoid naming the chief master artist. They use substitutions like Anan or Binaim.
Why?
This concealment is a profound historical clue. It points directly to the core, secret tragedy and symbolic legend that was too sacred or too profound to be written down, the drama that would later form the foundation of the third degree. The secret was preserved by silence.
So we've traced this continuous, organized lineage of builders preserving these symbols and allegories for over 3 millennia. But by the 17th century, the era of cathedral building was declining.
The operative period, which lasted nearly 1,000 years, was winding down due to shifts in patronage and the rise of secular university-trained architects.
And as the operative body shrank, its unique philosophical core began to attract an entirely new kind of member.
The accepted Masons. These were not professional stonecutters. They were scholars, antiquarians, mystics, nobility, gentrymen who were drawn by the symbolism and the profound moral wisdom that had been carried in the builders' allegories for so long.
And this custom of accepting non-operative members, it started quite early.
It did. We see hints in the old charges, but it becomes undeniable around 1600. The case of Elias Ashmole, the famous scholar and antiquarian who was initiated in 1646, is a perfect demonstration that lodges were already shifting their focus.
And these accepted Masons, because they had the time and the inclination, they sought to bring the philosophical side of the craft to the absolute forefront.
Shifting the primary focus from building physical temples to erecting the spiritual temple of individual and community character.
And the philosophical movement really culminated in the pivotal moment of the Grand Lodge of 1717.
Yes. This event wasn't an invention out of thin air. It was a formal consolidation that provided a new date and a new direction. It marks the formal transition from a practical building guild to a purely speculative, symbolic fraternity.
This is the moment where our cab call, the plotting of the moral destination, became the sole function of the order.
And the real radical heart of this transition is the moral revolution that's enshrined in Dr. James Anderson's Constitutions of 1723. This is the key philosophical takeaway for you, for the listener.
Okay, what was it?
The old operative rule had been that Masons must be of the religion of that country or nation where they worked.
So they had to be Christian or Muslim or whatever the local ruler dictated.
Yes, and that rule was completely discarded. This was a revolutionary act in the 18th century, an era just plagued by sectarian wars and religious persecution.
Absolutely revolutionary.
The new requirement was designed to oblige them to that religion in which all men agree. This redefined the entire fraternity. It moved the goalpost from theological conformity to universal moral unity.
So what was this universal religion that all men could agree on?
It was defined with stunning simplicity. To be good men and true, or men of honor and honesty, by whatever denomination or persuasion they may be distinguished. It wasn't about dogma, it was about ethical performance.
And this foundational change meant Masonry became the center of union and the means of conciliating true friendship among persons that must have remained at a perpetual distance.
Think about that in the context of London in the early 1700s. A place where a Catholic and a Protestant, a Whig and a Tory, could meet without fear of political or religious feud, united solely on the basis of being good men and true.
It was a radical, nonpartisan stance.
Completely. Masons were charged to avoid all political feuds, civil unrest, and partisan violence. The moral duty to maintain love of country and respect for law and order was elevated above all sectarian or political disputes.
And this non-sectarian platform provided the ideal environment for that profound final drama, the third degree, to flourish.
Yes, the Hiramic legend. The tragedy of the master artist who died preserving his integrity. It moved from being a guarded secret in the old charges to the central, defining allegory of the entire fraternity.
And this legend, which the sources claim is almost as old as the temple itself, it became the ultimate spiritual test.
It portrays the moral heroism of the soul, the willingness to accept death, betrayal, and violence rather than betray a trust or compromise one's commitment to truth and integrity.
It is the ultimate witness of divinity, the capacity of the human spirit to choose moral law even when faced with oblivion.
And the profound power of this symbolic drama is why the great Shakespearean actor Edwin Booth, who was a loyal Mason, he testified that he considered the Hiram legend the most real, so sublime, so magnificent tragedy. He said it was a greater honor to confer than any applause he ever received in the theater.
Because the moral lesson is what endures.
It's all that endures.
So, having charted this full cab call from the geometrical revelations in Egypt through the mysteries, the Collegia, the cathedral builders, and that philosophical revolution of 1717, we need a clear, modern synthesis. How do we define this enduring craft today?
Well, the simple definition is still powerful. A system of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. But to understand its active purpose, I like to look to the German handbook definition.
What's that?
The activity of closely united men who, employing symbolical forms, work for the welfare of mankind, striving morally to ennoble themselves and others, and thereby to bring about a universal league of mankind.
That emphasis on activity and striving is key.
It is. The entire philosophy rests on one sovereign reality. Faith in God the Father Almighty, recognized as the great architect of the universe. This acceptance of a divine purposeful order is the first and last truth. It's the cornerstone upon which everything else is built.
And the ethical core that flows directly from that faith is the simple yet profound moral law, love of God and love of man.
A code that demands justice, requires mercy, and insists on absolute fidelity.
The genius of the craft for modern application, then, is that the tools have been fully transmuted. They've become a kind of moral technology.
Yes, they're no longer about building physical walls. They are about correcting internal flaws. The square is now used, quote, for evening the inequalities of human character, for ensuring fairness in every single transaction.
And the compass, which once circumscribed the boundaries of the physical work,
is now used to help the individual draw a circle of goodwill around all mankind. It's about restraining our passions and our prejudices within due and necessary bounds, preventing us from infringing upon the rights of others.
We should probably also address the persistence of secrecy, which often generates confusion.
We should. The sources argue it serves two essential functions today. First, it promotes organized spiritual culture. What that means is it prioritizes discipline, self-improvement, and shared experience over rigid written doctrine.
And the second function?
Secondly, it provides a crucial and gracious cover for the practice of sweet charity. Secrecy allows members to aid a fallen or struggling brother, quietly, effectively, and without hurting his self-respect. It fulfills the ultimate command of love for man.
Let's end with the powerful segment that serves as the ultimate culmination of all this ancient philosophy applied directly to the individual. It's the test of character. When is a man a Mason? This is the definition of the destination we've been plotting on our cab call.
It is. It's a profound description of the ideal person, defined not by rituals attended or titles held, but by the actions and the outlook he embodies. And it starts with a crucial blend of humility and courage.
Humility and courage.
He has a profound sense of his own littleness in the face of the vast universe and eternal law, yet he retains an unshakable faith, hope, and courage, recognizing that courage is the root of every other virtue.
It also demands profound empathy and forgiveness.
Yes. A true Mason understands that deep down, every single person he encounters is as noble, as vile, as divine, as diabolic, and as lonely as himself. He seeks to know them, to forgive them, and to love them.
He learns to sympathize with men in their sorrows, and the source adds, yea, even in their sins, knowing that each man fights a hard fight against many odds.
That is a staggering statement, sympathizing even with their sins. It means withholding quick judgment and seeking context, knowing that moral failure often springs from struggle, not from malice.
Integrity and fidelity are non-negotiable.
Of course, he keeps absolute faith with himself, meaning his own conscience, with his fellow man, meaning his word is his bond, and with his God. He is true to the spiritual blueprint he has accepted, knowing his own character is the temple he is eternally building.
And finally, perspective. The spiritual sight that allows him to see beyond the immediate, the temporary.
The man who has this perspective can see something beyond mud in a wayside puddle because it reflects the sky above. And he can see something beyond sin in the most forlorn or failed person he meets.
This perspective is the ultimate power that faith and moral vision provide.
And such a man, the source concludes, has found the only real secret of Masonry, and the one which it is trying to give to all the world. That secret is not a word or a sign. It is self-mastery and universal love.
What an incredible journey.
It really is. We've traced how the simple, practical tools of the operative builder, the square, the compasses, the level, became the most enduring symbols of moral law and character. They survived the collapse of Rome and the rise of sectarian feuds precisely because the truth they carried was universal.
And that unique mission, codified in 1717, was to pursue unity amidst difference, to create a stable moral foundation where men could meet and build trust despite their competing political or religious identities.
It is an institution dedicated to making men friends based on a shared moral universe, striving toward that ultimate prophecy articulated by Robert Burns. That man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that.
If we connect this back to our central theme, the cab call, the necessity of navigating life's complexities demands stability. The Collegia's maxim, 3 make a college, taught us that a successful structure requires multiple stabilizing elements.
And the tools provide those elements. The square for justice, the plumb line for rectitude and uprightness, and the compasses for self-restraint and moderation.
So we leave you with this final, provocative question, drawn from this deep dive into the ancient blueprints of character. If your life is the temple, and its successful completion is your cab call destination, which 3 moral principles inspired by these ancient working tools, be it integrity, empathy, moderation, or courage, will you commit to using to stabilize your own character today, ensuring your inner structure is firm as the heavens?
Reflect on the tools you use daily to shape your life.
Think about that moral architecture as you plot your course. And if you have sources, questions, or a topic you think we should dive into next, let us know. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.